Hello, welcome to Community Office Hours with the Alfresco Engineering team today. I'm very excited to have Brian Remington, our VP of Engineering, and a lot of his team members. He's got a very large team, and selecting the group for this conversation was hard to do, so I'm sure we'll have others on in the future. I wanted to start off with a couple quick announcements, so sorry if I read those off my other screen. So the next Talk Live is going to be on February 4th. We're going to talk about iCal and testing. Because that's in 2 weeks, we got a lot of questions for office hours today. So we took all the iCal questions, and we're going to put those in that one. So in 2 weeks, we'll talk about iCal with the iCal team, David Webster, and I guess he's got some new people who are joining. So that's February 4th. Wanted to make sure everybody knows that the new Alfresco SDK 2.0 is available. There's a great doc on it at docs.alfresco.com. If you go in the 5.0 documentation and look for the SDK, there's a lot of instructions on how to use that. We'll be talking about that more during this hour. Records management is released for Alfresco 5.0, Alfresco 1.5.0. Well, it's prepared, I should say. It's due to be released very soon. I wrote available in early February, so I apologize for jumping the gun. I'm just so excited. So early February, you can get that for Alfresco 1.5.0. And Alfresco 1's out. Congratulations, engineering team. So I understand, Brian, you were able to celebrate a bit with your team after that release?
Yes, we went into London yesterday and had a meal at a nice restaurant in London. And I think the team that are on the call they look suitably blurry-eyed.
Well earned, well earned. So thank you for all your efforts, especially given the holiday season, to get that out. So it's an exciting release. Our last Tech Talk Live was on upgrading to 5.0. We had a lot of good conversation about that. The feedback I've received is that that's a very solid release, both of Alfresco 1 and of Community Edition. So yeah, congratulations all around.
Thank you.
So excellent. So I want to start by giving the panels, introducing the panelists. But maybe before we do that, Brian, if you could take a couple of minutes and just describe how your team's organized, because I know that the panelists we have on here does not represent your entire team. So if you wouldn't mind introducing each of the panelists and kind of explain how it fits into the organization of your team, I think that'd be really useful for people.
Okay, so let's, as I'm looking at them on the screen, I go left to right. So Gloria Broadbent is our globalization manager. She looks after all the translations that we do. We translate Alfresco 1 into 10 different languages now. We started with 3 a few years ago, and now it's expanded. She looks after Alfresco 1 and all our other products as well. Helen Mullally is next, and she's manager for our documentation. In fact, now it's being rebranded as our user assistance team to take account of the expanded scope now of what user assistance is, and not just docs, but also in-app help as well. Mark Rogers, senior software engineer. I think most people listening in will be familiar with Mark. He contributes hugely on the forums and works on the back-end side of Alfresco 1. Then it's you, Richard, next on mine, but I think everyone knows who you are. Samuel Langlois is our build and release manager. He's responsible for all of the products that we build, the development of the build scripts, the management of those build scripts, and all of the systems related to it, such as Bamboo and Crucible and Fisheye and so on. Will Taylor is next. He's QA director and is responsible for all of the testing that we do on, again, all of our products, Alfresco 1 being the biggest of those. And then the next one is me, and I'm VP of Engineering.
And what portions of your team are not represented today?
Quite a large portion. So I have about 80 people that I'm responsible for. 30 of those are outsourced resources, so we have 20 outsourced QA engineers, and 10, maybe even 11 now, outsourced sustaining engineers. We sort of divide up into applications and platform. And inside platform, we have three specializations, one being search and discovery, the next one being storage and infrastructure, and the last one being content services. Over on the app side, we have web applications and mobile applications, and we're just starting to form a team to work on application platforms, so to try and bring some commonality to the back-end stuff to support both mobile and web. We have a director of engineering operations, who's Brianna Werry, and she looks after the so all the globalization and all the systems and the project management around engineering. That reports into Brianna. We've also obviously got sustaining. We've got quite a substantial sustaining team that looks after all the maintenance. We support actively 50 lines, 50 release streams for Alfresco 1. Primarily, generally, we actively maintain about 10 of those, but there are 50 that we need to respond to, especially if there's a high severity security fix. QA I've mentioned. We've got a number outsourced that I've already mentioned, and we have about 10 employees that work in the QA side in Maidenhead. What have I missed?
It's a very dynamic group you've got, and it's interesting that, you know, when you compare it to some organizations, it's a really small team, and yet it's so much bigger than we used to have. It's interesting.
Oh, it's growing enormously. Yeah, I mean, it's got a lot bigger. So I've been doing this job for, I'm trying to think, actually it's going to be 3 years in about a few weeks' time, so nearly 3 years. And it's grown enormously in that period of time. So user assistants, we've got 5 authors working in there as well. 5. So all of that together is around about 80 people, 75 to 80 people. Software engineers, we have 35 software engineers.
And how do you expect your team to change in 2015?
I'm expecting us to grow quite considerably in 2015. So to put that in some context, so our financial quarters are slightly odd. They run, so we're currently in our financial Q4 that ends at the end of February, and we are looking to try to grow the engineering team by 20 people in those 3 months, which is quite a tall order. We've managed to hire 7 so far, so I've got a little way to go on that target. Looking forward, I'm expecting that to grow, not necessarily at that rate each quarter, but I'm expecting to be adding more test engineers, more software engineers, more authors, more people to work with Samuel on the tooling around the developer environment. Pretty much across the board, we'll be looking to hire people and try and make sure we hire the best people.
And how has that rate of growth complicated your life?
Quite enormously, actually, since you ask. It's a constant juggling act. So not only has the engineering organization grown, but the product management organization has grown even faster in percentage terms. So to put that into context, we now, in the last couple of months, we've gone from 3 product managers to 9 product managers. And actually that has complicated my life more because now I haven't grown engineering to that sort of level, so I'm trying to juggle more requests for resource, which is quite an interesting challenge.
Yeah, and I think that's a great bit of background. When we, as you know, when we discussed having this Office Hours as Summit, it was in response to a lot of questions about how do we collaborate with the larger community, and we said we will figure that out and report in January. And January's here, and we're going to share some good stuff with the community. But as you can tell, we've been really occupied too. So I apologize in advance to all the attendees that we didn't get as much done on collaboration with the community as we'd hoped. but we've gotten a lot done with improving our processes, organizing our team, preparing to scale, and I think you're gonna appreciate a lot of that. So Brian, question again for you is, you've got 25 people you want to bring onto your team. The people watching this broadcast are experienced Alfresco developers. How can they be part of that evaluation? How do they, if somebody wants to work for Alfresco, what do they do?
Apply. So if you go to the Alfresco website, a number of the jobs are on there. Not all of the jobs are on there right now. We've got a new recruiting system that we've brought on specifically to try and cater for the growth that we're trying to achieve. It's called Smart Recruiters. And that actually helps us deal with applications, so you can go online and you can post your CV there and put in notes about why you're applying for the role and why you're the perfect candidate. So I certainly encourage you to do that. We are hiring. We're looking for strong engineers. We'll be looking for people interested in installation and out-of-the-box experience stuff. All manner of things related to building good software product I'm interested in hearing about.
Excellent, excellent. So I think one topic that'll help lay groundwork for the conversation is, as you mentioned, product management at Alfresco. Traditionally, we had a very small group doing that, mostly within the engineering team. Now we have a larger, dedicated team doing that. How does product management differ from engineering, and how do the two teams relate? We had product management here on November,
we just fight all the time. No, that was a joke, by the way. So product management. So Thomas DeMeo heads up product management, and his team is responsible for defining the what, the why, who's the target audience, so the frame, what is it that's wanted and why is it wanted and who wants it. Then I'm responsible for interpreting that into solutions, so it's the how, and trying to give options as to how we might do it and what each option might cost and what the trade-offs are. And so there is a collaboration, a discussion that takes place, a negotiation, you could say, to work out what we're going to do when, and then I need to resource it and make sure we've got the right engineers delivering that stuff.
Excellent. So to lay some groundwork for the questions we're going to answer, some ground rules. We got tons of questions, and I appreciate the involvement and interest of all the community that submitted questions. But we're going to keep things really focused so we can cover as many as possible. So we postponed anything related to activity. We should have the activity team on at some point to discuss those. So we're going to stay focused on Alfresco 1. We're going to postpone any product management stuff. We should probably have another session with product management people. We're going to postpone the iCal stuff for Tech Talk Live. I think by taking those three groups and putting them for later, we'll be able to cover most of what's left. So I also wanted to make clear that this is an ongoing discussion. We weren't able to have definitive answers to all the questions that were submitted, but we discussed them, and we're going to discuss them again and continue on that process. So yeah, so that's a little background. So if you submitted a question and we don't get to it, it's probably because it's one of those camps, and feel free to follow up with me, and I'll try and get you an answer privately or in a future event. So one of the major parts of the engineering team and the product management team scaling is that we've had to change a lot of our internal tools to match this new organization. And Jira is probably the tool we use to collaborate most closely between the engineering team and the rest of the world. So how's Jira changed, and how are we going to continue to reorganize it over what's coming soon for Jira?
Well, okay, so how we've rearranged it. So if people have been watching projects being created, there are a number of new projects in Jira at the moment. The ALF project remains the project that is used primarily by community and for us to get input from the community. And we've made a couple of small changes there to try to help us triage issues that are raised there. It's quite a huge task, partly because there is a legacy build-up of things that are there that haven't been triaged yet. So it's probably worth just quickly talking about what those changes are. So we've introduced a new Boolean attribute that you can set, and I encourage you always to set this. If your issue has got a contribution, a patch, or a snippet of code that effectively is the thing that you want to give to us, so a bug fix, a test case, whatever it might be, there's now a flag that you can just tick to say, I've attached a contribution to this bug, for example. So it's from bugs and improvements. That will help us triage sort of quickly the things that have got a contribution, which are obviously slightly easier for us to deal with. We've also introduced a new group of users. I don't know, Richard, whether you want to talk about that. Maybe that's more in your camp. But that again, so the changes that we've made there are to try to make it easier for us to identify the things to triage quickly, because I do appreciate that things can sit there for quite a long time.
So occasionally I get reports that I submitted a patch and it's getting ignored. So that person should go into JIRA and find that and check that box on those issues where you've submitted a patch. And our maintainers for each component in the ALF project will be able to search for that more readily. Is that correct? That's
right, yeah. So, and I say that's purely to try to help us focus our efforts when it comes to triage. As well as triaging things from community, obviously we triage, we've got nearly 30 test engineers that are constantly raising issues that have to be triaged. I spend roughly an hour of my day every day just triaging issues. The more help we can get, the better it is for everyone.
I can expand on that, on the user group a bit. Brian had the idea that one of the ways we can better triage issues is by saying, we know this person is a solid community contributor. Let's make their issues rise to the top. Or this person's had good reports in the past. Let's make theirs rise to the top. So we made a community stars group. It's not populated yet. We only made it this week, so I got to get that done. I'm going to start with people who are listed as having had featured contributions in the wiki. There aren't many people there. There's like 10 or 12 people there, but it's a place to start. And then we need to come up with a policy we're still working on for how you get added to that and if or when you might get removed from that list. So, but that should make it easier as well. So expect more on that area.
Yeah. So if I just go into a few other projects that we have, so we have a project called ACE, and that's where, for 5.0, that's where we were managing all of the features and bugs that were raised on the 5.0 project, which started back in February, March last year. The use of that project has changed in the last few weeks because we've introduced another project, which is the Share application project. So we've now divided up the issues and the features and so on that are being built into the product into those two buckets. So platform is in ACE and the Share application is in Share. There's then projects for mobile, and we have separate projects for the different parts of mobile, so Android, iOS. We've got a project for each of those two SDKs as well, and I think there are another couple as well that I can't immediately bring to mind. And then for customer issues or issues that are raised in ALF and triaged through to the service pack, the service pack and hotfixes project that is used to get things done through the sustaining team. So those are typically bug fixes that will go into a service pack on a particular code line.
And that's still the MNT project?
That's the MNT project, yeah. The proper name for it is service packs and hotfixes, I think. Abbreviated MNT.
So service packs and hotfixes is mostly used by our internal support team, and community contributors should mostly be reporting through the ALF project, and when we triage, we'll move it into the other projects specific to that piece of the product.
That's right. So during triage, what we do is decide, well, first of all, is this something that we're going to find time to do? It's unfortunate. just the nature of the beast that we can't always do everything, and we're trying to be honest about what we can do and what we can't do. And those things that we can't do, we will let you know that we can't do it, and as much as possible why. Then things that we think we can do or should do or must do, we will move that issue, making sure it stays public, into one of the other projects, and therefore it will either go into the mobile projects, or it will go into the ACE project, the share project, or if we believe that it's something that we really need to put back into one of the enterprise code lines as well, then we'll bring it back and put it into the main project too. So that's basically what the triage process is for ALF, just trawling through and moving the issues or responding as a, sorry, I'm not going to be working on this one.
And you mentioned the concern about how to keep things, how to keep issues public or make sure that as much information is public as possible. How can we do that better? It's frequent that people run against a private issue and get stuck.
Yes, so things that go into the maint project, the service pack and hotfixes project, by default are internal only. And the reason for that, we had one or two occasions quite a while ago now where some customer-specific information had been exposed publicly, and clearly that's not good. We don't want to do that, and we should never do that. And therefore, by default now, customer-raised issues in that project are internal only. However, when an issue is moved from the ALF project, for example, then it is important that we don't use that default. We do mark it public, and we try very hard to make that happen. I know that sometimes that has slipped through the net, but that's not our intention. The intention is to always keep as much as we can public. I know also that there are some comments, again, on the service pack and hotfixes project. By default, all comments are private. That, again, is the default for the same reason that I mentioned before. But it's actually just something of an education to make sure that when an engineer puts a comment on, they are sort of read it and make sure, is this going to be sensitive, is it not going to be sensitive, and if it isn't sensitive, then mark it as public. But that on the main project does require an extra step that sometimes is overlooked. Typically on other projects, that is the default. The default is that it's public, and I know that, again, sometimes engineers are making comments private that don't necessarily need to be private, and we'll work on making that better and making sure that people know that public should be the default unless there's a good reason not to be.
One of the questions we got was, why can't we train the team to do this right? And it's a fair question.
Have you tried training 70 people? It's really hard.
Well, and I think the key point I want to make is that it's 70 new people. I mean, there's like 30 old timers, and then there's 30 that have been around for 6 months, and we're going to have another 30 over the next 6 months. So
honestly, it's the new people that are easy to train. It's the old people that are not so easy.
I think the most important thing. Sorry, I think the most important thing is that we've identified it's an issue, so we can do something about it. I think it's something that's possibly been accidental or not deliberate.
That's an excellent point, Mark. Appreciate that. So, so we had two other quick comments on Jira before we change topics. Is one of the questions we got was, can we provide more information in the user profile about the different Jira users so that you can see what's trustworthy and what's not? And unfortunately, we looked into that some, and there's just not an easy way to do that in Jira. We're still going to look into it. There's some add-ons to try and things like that, but it wasn't a simple click a button and be able to provide that, especially to maintain that list. So that's going to be a long-term thing. And the second is, we did an audit of some of our internal tools and realized that we were spending a lot more money on Jira than we expected because we have a lot of user accounts and you pay per user. So we went through and said, if a user account has not done anything in 18 months, and we can play with that threshold, we disable that. So if you think it should be longer, let us know. 18 to 24 seem like the right trade-off between cost and activity, changing between projects. But if your account gets disabled, email community@alfresco.com. If you notice in the forums that somebody has that problem or hear about it, we can re-enable those accounts. But we had thousands of accounts that hadn't been used that were just sitting there. So we wanted to do that a little different. I think that's the JIRA list. Just checking IRC. No questions on JIRA from the community. Wanted to ask some questions about, when we were talking about making things public, making issues public in JIRA, we mentioned that we're training our team to turn things public. But there are also some key points where we try and make, around releases, where we try to actually look and make things public. What are our policies around that, and how do we want to do that ideally, and how can we do it better?
I'm not sure I understand that question, actually, Richard. So around releases.
My understanding, and Samuel might have more information, or will, that when we do a release and we put together release notes, my understanding was we went through the release notes. We're supposed to go through the release notes and verify that we're linking to public issues, or figure out how to make them public or clone them into public issues so that the release notes have more public content.
Yeah, I can help a bit on that. So what we do, we list all the issues which are fixed in this service pack typically. Then we have a look at those which are not public, and we make sure they are not public for a good reason. So when we publish the release notes, there are some issues which have a link which are public. The ones which are not public are maybe they contain some sensitive information, or there can be security issues with details we don't want to expose. But we do have a look at each of them and make sure it's not public for a good reason.
Excellent, appreciate that. And the question from the audience is about security-related bugs in JIRA, and I appreciate that question because I missed that point in our notes, is that there is a security, what's the name of that field? Security severity drop-down when you report an issue in the ALF project. And if you select something in there, that highlights it and it goes right to Pete Phillips on our security team to review. So if you do set a security severity, we ask that you make it private until we've reviewed it. We couldn't find a way to do that automatically in JIRA. We were trying to add a note to clarify that too, and JIRA can be hard to manage. But yeah, that's how security issues are reported in the Alfresco project, in the ALF project. If you have any questions, email community@alfresco.com, and I'll get that directly and work with you on it. Anything else we should say about security issues? Okay, so
well,
again,
we
for
can certainly
Samuel,
talk about how quickly we jump on them. So we have an SLA for security issues. That means that anything that is raised and triaged as high severity needs to get released within. In fact, we need to try and find a fix for that within 5 working days and get it released, certainly into cloud within 5 working days. And for customers that are on enterprise, we have to get it released out to them as well. So a high severity security issue, that's the sort of thing that needs to get patched back to all 50 code lines that we support. So we hope we don't find too many of them because there's quite a lot of work involved. Then medium severity, that's a different time period, and I think that's 14 days, and that only has to go on to the top versions for enterprise, and then the low severity just has to go into the next minor release that we make. Richard's looking very still indeed.
I apologize for that. Can you hear me again?
I can hear you. You're not moving still, but...
Yeah, my USB hub with my camera and headset just crashed, so we'll we'll fix that in a moment. But I just was pointing out that on docs.alfresco.com in the support area that we have our external security policy, and that lays some of that out. We do need to add to that information about public disclosure. We're working on how we're going to do that. And one of the other questions was, what's our policy around patching Community Edition when there's a security issue?
So it depends on the severity of the security issue. If it's high, then we will patch that back to the latest version of Community that's been released. So, for example, we did that while we were working on 5.0. We found a high severity security issue that we patched back, and I think that resulted in 4.2F from memory being created. That's something that we don't normally do. We normally just are working on head and the releases that are coming off the builds, the nightly builds that come off head. But when there's a high severity security issue, we will patch that back. And obviously, because of that, the code that we have put in there will be visible to people as well. Yeah, so we don't. So medium and low, that just goes into head when it comes through from the maintenance branches. Normally that gets in there pretty quickly, and it will just come out in a nightly build.
Excellent. And one of the people ask why we're really conservative about how much Community Edition we patch. Samuel, in your lightning talk at Summit, you mentioned how many code lines you patch for each one of those. What's that number again? I forgot.
It was 50 something, the last high severity security issue we had, yeah, because we had to patch all the 3.4.0 to 3.4.14, so that's 15 already, plus 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, and we even went as far as 2.8, so that's quite a lot, yeah.
So yeah, that's 50 some odd lines to release is a lot of work. So one of the questions from the community was if we could tag the fixes in Subversion so the community could backport them in cases where we don't have the resources to do it. And we talked about that and decided that's probably going to be a case-by-case basis. We're going to need to evaluate that. There's a trade-off between getting too explicit on specific vulnerabilities before people have the opportunity to upgrade, and I don't know. That's going to take more research. There was a question on larger suggestions for larger changes in Alfresco. So sometimes there's specific issues that you can report against in the Alf project, but sometimes it's more of a question of here's a class that needs some love, some refactoring. How do you give that type of feedback on the code to the engineering team?
Generally, I would say raise an improvement issue in Jira. If you've got a contribution, so if you've got the class and this is what you think it should look like, then attach that to it. If you do that, then tick the box to say you've put a contribution on it. And as far as possible, demonstrate why this is needed. So test cases that are failing that shouldn't be failing, test cases that prove that your version is better. Anything really that helps validate what your argument is, why you think that, and why we should act on it is really what's needed. As with all these things, so just an awful lot of what we do in engineering is trying to balance priorities and trying to make sure that we are working on the most valuable thing at any moment in time, and that every engineer is working on something that is really valuable. And when making those judgments, there are a huge number of options that we have available on us. We could be working on one of 100 different things at any moment in time. So anything that you can do to make it easy for us to make the judgment, yeah, this is something we should do now, is important. And if you want a contribution or an idea to be taken up, give as much information as you can that makes that compelling for us, really.
And I think a lot of I found that our engineering team really enjoys feedback. If you write a long form blog post about your idea and post it in the forums, it seems like it usually gets read and usually gets feedback too. So, you know, a lot of back and forth. Yeah, go ahead,
Mark. I can comment there, I mean, it does happen that someone will point out a certain class or something isn't as good as it should be, at which point someone like my response will be, yes, I fully agree with it. But as Brian said, unless it's specific points, it becomes a little bit difficult. I mean, you know, the engineers know that there's lots of code that needs refactoring. And to be honest, we just need to get down and do it. But if someone just points out something needs refactoring without, you know, without doing the extra mile, then it probably won't get done unless that corresponds to an engineer's particular need or requirement. Because I have a long list of things I want to refactor, as well as community issues.
We've got to trade off the desire for perfection against getting immediate benefit, and that's a hard balance, probably.
But I mean, so, at some points, I mean, I particularly remember some of Jeff Potts's points. You know, he points out things that can't be extended in flexible ways. You know, very valuable feedback and easy to fix. But the point was that I mean, I mentioned Jeff Potts in particular because he did give some very clear suggestions.
Excellent. Thanks for that insight, Mark. Excellent. So the question always comes up, and Samuel probably has strong opinions on this. Why are we on Subversion instead of putting all our code in GitHub?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, both internally and externally. I understand the hype around Git and GitHub and so on, but the truth is that we are using GitHub already quite extensively. All the mobile code, whether it's the SDK or the apps, whether it's iOS or Android, all of this is open source on GitHub already. There's a few other things on GitHub, and we have mirrored the community edition on GitHub as well. Then, why are we on Subversion? Historic reason, and when Alfresco started, Git was not there yet. That's probably a good reason enough. And why aren't we moving to GitHub? It's, well, we can't just as it is now. There are technical reasons. You know, GitHub is limited to 1 gigabyte repositories, so the repository just doesn't fit. Even the community mirror is a bit above that threshold, and GitHub is nice enough to allow us anyway.
It took a lot of work to get that to happen.
Yeah. I know. I heard about that, yeah. Thank you for that work, Richard, by the way. So, yeah, it cannot fit as it is now. There are missing things in GitHub as well. We use Subversion to give different level of access in our code. We have community level, we have the enterprise level, which is only available to customers and partners, and we have the private area in Subversion as well, typically for the cloud bits, myalfresco.com. So we cannot do that in Git. The way would be to split the repository in smaller chunks. That's how you do with Git and GitHub, but that's a long-term process. We are talking about that. Nothing is settled yet, so maybe that will come one day, but not in the coming months, I'd say.
Though we have been making a lot of progress. The iCow team told me I can make this public, but they want to move. They're pulling the iCow piece of share separate and going to put that as a separate repository so we can manage releases of that independently and accept pull requests.
Yeah, that's already done actually on Subversion, and they are going to move that to GitHub very soon. Yeah.
So over time, you've seen it in Jira as we split things into different projects. We're splitting the code base into different repositories. We're having separate release cycles so we can release, so it doesn't have to be one big launch of everything. All of this is moving towards that same end goal of easier to contribute, being able to accept patches easier, and having more agility in updating things. Trying to think if why can't we give committer rights to top community contributors?
Well, there's a number of reasons for that, really, and part of it actually relates to the number of code lines and the period of time that we have to support this. So in the past, when taking code in, we have been stung, and it's been either a lot of work to get it into a product quality, or it's given us support issues or maintenance issues down the line. Certainly, if you want to contribute, I'm keen to try to find a way of having people contribute, but history hasn't been really kind to us in that respect, and we have had difficulties making things that are contributed general enough for productization. Often they're quite specific to maybe a particular customer's needs, and making it, for instance, aware of multi-tenancy or localizable or other areas like that has taken quite a lot of work. And once we take it, we need to own it, and that ownership means we need to have faith in it, and it's going to be around for a long time. So as Samuel said, we are still, admittedly not very often, but we're going back quite a number of years when maintaining our code lines, and so anything that goes into our code line today will be around for the next 5-6 years in a maintenance mode. So it's something that we're a little bit careful about, possibly overly careful, but there is a reason for that.
Thanks for the explanation. I think when we were discussing this in our prep call, Mark said, we're even really strict on who inside Alfresco gets committer rights. And I don't have committer rights.
Yeah, I mean,
that's probably best for everybody.
I think so.
Well, I mean, as well as needing to take ownership of code, we also have quite complicated rules about what can be checked in where. So, that becomes quite difficult. And if someone checks a piece of code into a build that's just going out of the door, potentially that could be quite serious. If we put a regression, So not all of Alfresco, even people that you would think, such as Richard, has committer rights.
So how can a contributor submit a patch that's likely to be accepted? Is there guidance on that topic? A checklist for quality?
Well, we don't currently have a checklist for quality, but it's a good question, and something actually that we can probably distill out of some of the work that Peter Monks has done quite recently with partners and getting certified solutions from partners. So part of that was around what APIs you're using, how you're using them, what test coverage you've got, and so on. And that basically could form a basis that we can build a checklist that sort of, if you do this, then you've got a better chance of having your contribution accepted. But fundamentally, it's use the APIs that are public. It depends what the nature of the contribution is. If it is a bug fix, then give us a test case that proves that the code is broken in the first place and proves that with your stuff applied, it's no longer broken. So that's a sort of a basic thing. If you're saying there's a bug, and give us a test case that proves it, and again, it's just give us as much help as we can, because we've got lots of other things vying for our attention. So make yours the easiest path for us rather than making it hard for us.
Yes, I'd second that. I don't think I've ever seen a test case contributed. I mean, we might have had one or two, but I remember at one point I got quite keen on making sure that things marked as contributions got into the product. So I put a few that I thought looked good candidates. They knocked over the bill and didn't have tests. So eventually, unfortunately, those got backed out. But certainly, if you can clearly explain what an issue is and tests, then it will probably go. It's easier for us to put in.
That's basically the message here. Make it easy for us, and it's more likely to happen. There's always lots to do.
Yeah, and we're working on taking some of the certification criteria and some of the consulting best practices and producing more of a quality checklist, but that's an ongoing project. There is a technical validation tool that can check your code for key malpractices that can be flagged. That's in the Alfresco Labs GitHub project. And as Mark said, a lot of the issues we get, they're just not well written. It's hard to understand what the problem is. So we really, Will can talk to this, but we spend a lot of time trying to reproduce these issues. And the more help you can give us in making things reproducible, the more likely it is we'll tackle it.
Well, and indeed, just trying to understand some of these issues is very difficult. I'm not saying that all of them, but some of them, a good percentage of them, you read them and think, what's this? Especially if there's no clear test case identified.
It's very important to have the steps to reproduce what the expected result is, so it's clear for the developers as well as to retest to know what it should be doing.
And if you include test data, that's great. Please scrub it of confidential stuff so that we can use it and even pass it upstream if we find out it's part of an upstream library. Test data is a great thing, but make sure it can be publicized. Any other thoughts on what makes a good issue report?
Nope. Make it clear, unambiguous, and easy for us.
Excellent. So we need to skip a bunch of questions on this topic. I think we covered the main ones. How do we get accept more? But I wanted to make sure to reserve some of the last 10 minutes and talk about the documentation and how that process works. So first of all, I just want to make sure, Helen, the documentation for 5.0 is so good. I keep finding nuggets in there that I pass it all the time. Thank you for your team's work. It's been neat to see between 3.4 and then in the 4.0 release we had a lot of new stuff, and in 5.0 release there's some really good tutorials, and the developer documentation you can see huge changes. Just great work.
Yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate that feedback, and believe me, there was a lot of work went into trying to make improvements to the doc. So we're trying to do more than just cover the new features, but try to identify some of the areas that have been sort of lacking in some attention for some time. So, and we're continuing to do that. There are some other areas that we're looking into, but I think the developer docs intro page is a massive improvement. Tony Bedford worked on that, and I think it's an amazing improvement just to try and give some pointers to where to go, what you're trying to do. I think that was a really big improvement. So yeah.
So if somebody wants to suggest a change to documentation, what's the right way to do that?
Well, I guess there are few ways, but I mean the first way I would suggest is there's the feedback form at the bottom of the page. So you can just put a comment in, give a suggestion or point out anything you think needs a correction, and that just goes as an email to the whole docs team, and we I guess effectively triage it and make a decision on whether we can follow up on it. We do try our best to follow up with all of the emails, because I think it's worth responding, at least to get either more information or just to clarify a point. We will, where something we need to follow up on, we will raise a JIRA ourselves to follow up on it. So I think that's actually a really, really good way of just giving quick feedback. Saves the hassle of creating a JIRA if you don't want to. But we are changing the JIRA process at the moment as well, with all these other improvements to the way we're using JIRA in engineering. I'm trying to consolidate all of the documentation issues into one project, so it's a lot easier just to identify where to go to for docs issues. So there is an existing project called Docs, which we've been using for 5.0 features and bugs, and I'm trying to expand that and open it up. So that's coming too. So hopefully that will help with giving the feedback. But you can always send an email to docs@alfresco.com as well. That's the other option. So we don't really mind however the feedback comes. We really don't mind at all. We appreciate any kind of feedback. So yeah, I think that's the best way.
And I know you've got this request in the past, but can we have public comments?
Yeah, do you know, we've looked at this quite a few times, haven't we, Richard? We did consider public comments from basically from the initiation of the WFU feedback form. We looked into doing some kind of commenting system, and technically it's easy to do, but it's more to do with the overhead of monitoring and managing those comments. And basically we've got to cover all of the Alfresco versions, all the documentation sets for all the Alfresco versions and products. So it's quite a big overhead for the team. But if there is real demand for this, this is another time it's been mentioned, I am really open to introducing it to the community docs, because I think if there's a real benefit there, then definitely it's worth pushing ahead with that. So yeah, I've definitely taken note of that.
Excellent. And on that topic as well is, how do we find the right documentation for previous versions of Community Edition? So there's always the most recent Community Edition docs, but where's the 4.2 Community Edition docs?
Yeah, we made a decision some time back that we would always just publish the most recent community docs, and I think it is a bit of an overhead to maintain all of the previous community docs. Where we would draw the line on that, I don't know, but so really the best answer to that is that if you're looking for documentation for a previous Alfresco version, there's the whole enterprise documentation set there. We still publish going back to 3.4, so we have 3.4, 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, and obviously now 5.0. So that's there and available. So you can always fall back on the enterprise versions.
And we talked about maybe improving the labeling so that's clear in the documentation.
Yeah.
I have to move really fast. There are some comments about getting more content, maybe putting all the docs into GitHub to collaborate. That would be a bigger change. It was a good suggestion. We're thinking about it.
Yeah, we can do that.
There was we have a content strategist on our customer support team. So this isn't really engineering, but she manages the knowledge base and how the support team gets content to customers. And we've been working together on how we can make more of that public. So hopefully you'll see fruits from those conversations soon. The last topic is I want to switch to translations and ask the same question of Gloria. If somebody has a comment, wants to suggest an improved translation, how do they do that?
At the moment, it comes through JIRA, and I know that I think it's not the preferred method, but it is something that it's accessible and also gives the option to include a screenshot, to include clearly what is that it says and what it should say, and even sometimes a reference to which part of the software it can be found, which of the files, which of the UI files. So far I think it's been effective, and I've received comment feedback from some members of the community, and it's of great help, and I would like to take this opportunity to encourage people to give as much feedback as they can.
And is that would be in the ALF project, and how do we mark that as a translation suggestion?
And normally it comes in the heading as the locale, like if it's for German, they can use DE, or they can just say German, and then the headline for the specific bug. We don't have a specific entry to select it as a linguistic bug, but once it's labeled as a language, then it comes automatically to me.
Excellent, very useful. And the other question we get on this topic is, when will we address right-to-left concerns in the product? Do we have specific plans around that?
We've done some tests, but I think Brian could answer that better.
Thanks, Gloria. Right at the moment, I don't have anything on the backlog that is going to address that specifically. It would be useful actually to have someone from the share team here, but I don't at the moment. We have looked at this in the past, and there is a large amount of it that works fine, but there are certain parts of it that do not. Something that I'm hoping and have maybe expecting is that as iCal develops out and we start using iCal more consistently through share, that could well help us with this particular problem as well. In fact, for iCal, I'm expecting that to improve both the way that we test the share application. I'm hoping that it will give us substantially better accessibility and also potentially address the right-to-left problem.
Excellent. And David Draper did some tests on that topic. So next Tech Talk Live, you can ask David that question. So last question.
Actually, just quickly on the localization topic as well. When marking, in order to mark an issue as a localization issue, there is in fact a component on the issue. So when creating the issue in the ALF project, one of the components that's available to you is L10N. So if it is a localization issue, then put that component against it, and actually that will route it directly to Gloria for triage.
Excellent. So last question, we only have a couple of minutes. I know you've all got other meetings, but Boris is dying to know, what are the Easter eggs in Alfresco?
I don't know.
Your team doesn't tell you about them, Brian?
Nobody's told me. No, they keep that very much to themselves.
Okay, Mark, where did you put the flight simulator?
It's an excellent suggestion, but we don't have a culture of sticking Easter eggs in yet.
As far as we know on this call.
Yes, and I can't admit it to Brian anyway.
No, actually, putting Easter eggs in open source software is really quite hard.
That is true. I hadn't thought about it that way, but absolutely. Well, that's so we are at the top of the hour. I want to thank all the panelists. I appreciate your time out of your busy schedules to come. The conversations we had in preparation for this call were really useful. I want the community to know that we had a lot of questions we weren't able to address, and I apologize for that. Just a lot of good interest. But they were good conversations we were able to have. We do take these issues seriously. We want to collaborate better with you, everybody who wants to collaborate with us. And as we're growing and changing, it's always going to be a struggle, but we are definitely working on it. Brian, anything you want to close with? I'll give you the last word.
Oh gosh, I wish I'd prepared something now. No, honestly, the opportunity to speak with the community is great. I'd like to do it again. In fact, we should do this on a regular cadence. I'm not quite sure whether that's every 3 months, every 6 months, whatever might be appropriate, but I'm keen to make sure that the communication channel is kept open, and I'm keen to hear more from the community. And despite being very busy and everyone in engineering being very busy, that's not in any way to say that we don't value the community, because we do very much, and we will do whatever we can to make the collaboration work.
Excellent. So thank you for that, and I will hold you to that. We do need to do this again. So with that, we'll close this session. Next event is Tech Talk Live the first week of February. We're going to talk about iCal and be able to continue some of this conversation, mostly around testing. And you've now met a lot of the key leaders in the engineering team, and feel free to reach out, and we'll continue working together. So with that, thank you.